We are about to start again. We are now 8 minutes late. So I know the cakes and the snacks are delicious here at the Confederation of Danish Industry, but that shouldn't prevent us from getting started not too far behind. For those of you just joining us, we have had a morning of speakers from the Confederation of Danish Industries, from the Danish Ministry of Environment, the organizers that I will get back to here at the end. We also had the Portuguese ambassador to Denmark to speak about the priorities of the Portuguese EU presidency. We had the director of the European Innovation Council to tell us about the new initiatives in that field from the EU, and then we had a talk on internationalization, SMEs, and right before lunch there was a panel on Copenhagen as a sustainable hub. Now next up is a panel on innovating your way to a sustainable tomorrow. And here we will hear 5 different angles to that subject, whether it's a UN-led accelerator, whether it's what the European Commission is doing, how to work with commercialization of research and connecting that to both SME startups and the public sector, whether it's a large Danish corporation, well, actually not just Danish, but has headquarters here, Arla, and how they work with sustainability, but it's particularly in packaging. And then last but not least, also how the Danish Innovationsfonden is working with these issues. So now I think I have been, again, treading water enough for us to start, and everyone to have joined us, that should be joining us. I would like to say welcome to Camilla Brückner, Director of the UNDP Nordic office. Welcome, Camilla. Stefan Welin, Deputy Head of the Representation of the European Commission. Velkommen. Maria Skotte, Director of Clean. Welcome. Lise Berg, Kildemark, Director of Sustainable Packaging, Product and Innovation at Arla Foods. And last but not least, René Damkjer, Innovation Officer at the Innovation Fund. So, I have asked, as with the last panel, this panel to give a short 5-6 minute introduction on their take on how you can innovate your way to a more sustainable tomorrow. And I would like to start out with Camilla from the UNDP. I know you had an SDG accelerator, actually, or you still have. And tell us some more about your take on this subject.
Is it on? Yeah. Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to this panel on innovating your way to sustainable future. As an UN organization, we often see things, in the grander perspective, and I would probably have fitted better into the first panel of the first section normally, but due to this program that we have innovated and implemented here in Denmark and in some of our other countries, I'm very happy to speak at this panel because it is an exemplification of how you can put the SDGs into practice as a company.
I was actually thinking of that before. When you work with policies and framework conditions, working with startups and SMEs is really rewarding because then suddenly you see what works and how to make a difference.
Absolutely, because we usually work with governments, advising them on how to plan and strategize. And of course, one of our main objectives is to help governments and countries to transform with the SDGs at the center of their planning and strategies and budgeting. But to that, we cascade into many layers of society in over 170 countries. And we wanted to show how the SMEs, which forms a very important part of society, can also help that transition. 90% of companies all over the world are in the SME segment. And we saw that both the multinationals and the startups got a lot of attention in the beginning. So we thought there is need to put a special focus on the SMEs. And they were in this category that fell between 2 chairs while they really wanted to join that engagement and that journey on transformation, they found it difficult to find the tools and the finance to actually get onto that journey. So that's when we came up with the idea of trying to create a program and some tools that could help them on this journey. And so we did that with a lot of different partners, and we decided to start here in Denmark because the environment was very mature and conducive. We saw from consultations leading up to the Sustainable Development Goals, negotiations and formulations when we did consultations with the private sector, that there was a lot of interest and a lot of knowledge. Also because in the Nordic countries, you already had a climate and an understanding for the agenda as such. So we thought we'll try it here in a pilot program, and then we will export it to the rest of our network in all these countries. So we partnered up with several of the bigger multinationals who could give us some input to their experiences. What had they found were particularly challenging for them, even though they were bigger, but also investors, think tanks, the IFU, the Development Finance Institutions, etc. And out came, I'll cut it short now, we also worked with Deloitte as the more management consulting side of the bargain. They brought in the processes, the innovation mechanisms, and we brought in the SDGs. And we tested this program with 32 companies from wide variety of sectors. And 31 of them actually came out with sustainable business solutions that met the challenges in the SDGs. Part of the tools were also to identify what in the SDGs can actually be translated directly into business language. So 60% already of the SDGs, we have made these business opportunity cards where you can actually already translate the SDGs into a language that businesses will understand and see business opportunities in. So this is now a program that is finished, but all these companies are still working and putting their solutions into market. And we are replicating this model with now, currently with the maritime sector. So we're trying now a sector approach, see if this gives other dynamics. And we're also advising several of our country offices in our program countries on starting the program there as well. So for instance, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, we have started a program. We started in Moldova. We are talking to our Ukraine office. We are talking to India. I mean, imagine if India got to roll out this program, then you could really get some traction. China has expressed interest, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we are.
So it was an accelerator, just to make clear, for SMEs that were not necessarily related to the SDGs, but you accelerated their connection or their integrating the SDGs into their innovation processes, business plans, etc., right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was very much hung up or up against the SDGs. They had to identify specific issues within the SDG agenda that they could meet. And of course, starting with the areas, I mean, often we found that the companies were not short of ideas. On the contrary, they had too many ideas and could not focus. So one of the exercises for us was actually to help them home in on one or two ideas that had a realistic chance of succeeding. Mm-hmm. And then within these ideas, they would hit often several of the SDGs in terms of meeting the challenges within these SDGs. So I can give an example. We had a company called Dismo that has this solution for collecting oil spills from the sea. And it's an old company, and it's an old family-owned Danish company that has existed for over 100 years. And we couldn't teach them anything new on their technology. That's one thing that they had. They had to refine it. What they wanted to do was to narrow this technology down to apply it to rivers, because most of plastic and waste that comes into the sea come from the 10 biggest rivers in the world. So this technology they wanted to apply to rivers, but their question was, how do we get started? Which country should we aim this technology, and how do we get into the market? And there we help them more on the marketing aspect of their solution and the whole aspect of linking up with the appropriate authorities and bodies that were relevant for them. And this was in the case of India. And now they are testing, actually, this technology in several rivers in India, and should it succeed, they have scope for a very large contract or deal with the government or authorities, local authorities in India.
So that alone already is a great achievement.
Yes.
Let's move to Maria Skotte from Clean. Tell us about Clean, first of all, and then also how you've been approached this project. I hinted at it earlier today, the connection between research and SMEs, startups, and the public sector.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. And it's really great to be here in person with real people, real time. I really enjoy this. I know a lot of people are still listening in, but those of us here, I think it's really great.
Feels like being at a rock festival.
Something like that. Well, for those of you who don't know Clean has been appointed to be the national cluster organization in Denmark for environmental technologies. Our aim is to make Danish companies leading in environmental solutions. So we have a big task ahead of us, but we also think that there is a huge potential. I mean, we are doing such a great job in Denmark, and we just need these environmental solutions to go global. And the way we work is we work in this triple helix domain, where we facilitate the cooperation between the public, SMEs, and knowledge institutions. And we do this by conducting matchmaking, networking, really building an ecosystem where these different partners join up and simply new ideas arrive or evolve. And our main purpose is to create innovation, and we do that exactly by facilitating these cooperations. And maybe just to be a bit more specific, the environment, it's very broad. We tried to narrow it down. We've had a very interactive process with a lot of stakeholders. And for the moment, or for the next 4 years, we'll be focusing on water and climate adaptation, waste and resources, and air, and also nature, biodiversity. So it's still broad, but I think now we're being a bit more focused, and we can really see that, I mean, just the last year we have, I think it's around 100 new SMEs joining us, because they can see that by being part of an ecosystem and being part of what we're standing for, they can see that new possibilities arrive. And with the feedback we get from our companies, or the companies that are members at Clean, they say that the more they engage, the more they get something back. So it's, I mean, you can't just sit back and expect a lot of things coming your way. You need to engage, like your program. I mean, we have a lot of projects going on, a lot of offers. You need to, take part in it, and new opportunities will arrive. Yeah.
When you say that you're working with SMEs related to the environment, and you narrowed it down, you said with water and air and nature and biodiversity. What about a startup in the sustainable fashion sector, for example, that takes a waste product and turns it into fabric or textile that can be used? Should they be with the lifestyle and design cluster, or should they go to you? Because essentially what they're trying to do, it has an environmental impact. Yeah,
and that's a very good question. There are 14 clusters in Denmark, and we represent different sectors or different areas. And of course, the environmental area overlaps with everything. So I think whenever we talk about a specific solution, then we are involved. But if it was a fashion, a designer, then they would be in the lifestyle cluster. But I mean, we cooperate all the time. You have the same in building materials. I mean, when we tear down buildings, there's a lot of environmental technologies right now being developed. Should they belong to the building cluster or at ours? And I think it depends. And we cooperate and do things together. The same with the digital side of things. I mean, digital solutions, they go across every field. So of course we also cooperate a lot here. Yeah.
That's reassuring to know, because some of the greatest strides for the environment would be working with some of the sectors that are the worst for the environment. So
yeah,
yes.
And actually this thing about looking into other sectors than what you normally are working in, I think that's where we see most new innovations, actually. I mean, we really see that something being applied in one area, in the food area, for example, suddenly if you use it in some other area, you see a huge potential. So that's what we're also really trying to make people be inspired and try to look into other areas than what they're normally doing.
I remember we did a session on internationalization with an Estonian startup that was working on vegan leather. But due to the corona crisis, they actually had I think it was 200 times double their revenue, because they had pivoted from vegan leather into any kind of fabric that somehow is conducive to still breathing and then stops virus and bacteria from passing. So this kind of moving out of your area might be good for some SMEs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can maybe bring another example. Yes, I just spoke with a company that is joining a panel discussion I'm having tomorrow, and they're called Aguardio, and they've developed a nudging device when you're taking showers, that you should take shorter showers. And then a customer said,
turning the water colder?
I think mostly make it shorter. But then they had a customer saying, well, can you do something about the toilets running? You know, in the hotel business, it can be lots of money. And they were like, And now it's turning into being maybe their biggest business. So I think this dynamics is very important to be open to new possibilities. Yeah.
Now I'll jump a little bit randomly here to René, Damkjer, Innovation Officer at Innovationsfonden. How are you trying to help startups, SMEs, or corporates or public sector to be more sustainable and have a greater green impact?
Give them money.
You give them money.
Yeah. The Innovation Fund is the Danish government's board for soft funding. We heard Rolf early on from Vækstfonden. He has the hard funding. That's money that you have to pay back.
Yeah, return on investment.
Yeah, in the Innovation Fund, we give them as grant. We call it an investment because we have the requirements of investment. We are investment taxpayers' money. But we have different programs from our Inno-Founder program, which is for people who have a great idea and want to establish themselves as a company. We have the InnoBooster program, which I'm in charge of, where we invest 40 million euros a year in startups and SMEs who have a knowledge-based new idea, and until our Grand Solution program, where we actually bring together research and SMEs and large companies around it. You can say a global problem or a possible great solution. So we have different schemes where we actually go in and invest these money and also try to, let's say, to find some of the best and interesting solution, and especially try to bring different people together and see if you come from for example, with vertical farming, coming from an ICT world, is actually the people revolutionizing agriculture at vertical farming. It's not the farmers. And look at different perspectives like that. So actually what we do is bring in money to the table. We have approximately 350 million euros this year, and most of that money is actually spent within the green transition. That's because the politicians have decided that's where the taxpayers' money should go. So from our Innomissions, which is a new tool this year, we have 700 million Danish kroner, 100 million euros. And in the InnoBoost, I think approximately half of our funding, that means 20 million euros, have to go to green projects, to companies who have an edge, and a new idea, a new business potential. So that's how we work with that.
Could you give some examples of these greater challenges? Is it something like we should all drive electrical cars, or is it that we should all become vegan, the last frontier?
Well, we have a lot of different projects. It could be a new kind of environmental tarmac. It could be one of the projects I'm close to is reducing the methane from cows. We have the hypothesis is to reduce it by 50 to 75% within 8 years' time. I think that's something that Lise would benefit of. So we have a new project with Bestseller where we actually try to take polyester and resolve it and make new polyester so that you're not degrading the fabrics, but reusing that at the same level. And what's important in these projects is also the scale. If Bestseller succeeds, then we have a global possibility. If we succeed with reducing methane from cows, it's also a global business. So we're actually trying to combine great ideas with a huge scale so that we not only solve the problem, but that we also benefit from it as a society, making money. So we try to balance that out to help with the green transition and to actually go forward in that, but also to remember that the Danish companies and the Danish society as a whole have to earn money on it. Mm-hmm. So that's how we... And
the solution should be Danish, or can they also come from abroad, or is it there has to be some kind of collaboration?
Well, we hope and we enforce the Danish companies and the Danish research to make international collaboration, because we cannot solve it ourselves. But it is Danish taxpayers' money, so it has to benefit the Danish society at the end of the day. But it's a global problem and it's a global market, so of course we also go for the global solutions.
Can we solve it here? We can also solve it elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And then bring, if it's solved elsewhere, then adapt it to the Danish conditions.
Stefan, Welin, welcome. You're working, you're the deputy head of representation for the European Commission. So we had Stina Sovata up here earlier to start it. We also have heard a bit from the European Commission on how the European Commission is approaching the subject. But can you elaborate on what we've heard so far?
Well, I can start by just setting the policy context at the European level, and then go in perhaps also to some of the funding sources that are available from our side. I mean, I've been in the European Commission for 23 years, and most of that time I worked on environmental issues. And I can say that the attitude within the European institutions to these issues have changed completely. I mean, it used to be only a few years ago, at best it was seen as just another little policy area on the side doing their little thing, not connected with us. At worst, it was seen as a break to what they were trying to do, whether it was SME policy trying to help SMEs, or whether it was the people sitting in DG Agri trying to help farmers. And environment was seen as a burden, as something that tried to stop progress.
Yeah, wasn't it often seen also as the EU setting up standards that the rest of the world didn't have to live up to, and that would change remove the level playing field, and would also be an area for, should Poland join the EU, then they have to start cleaning the rivers.
No, but I mean, but it's completely changed. I mean, why it has changed? Partly because it's easy to see the pressure from outside society. I mean, everybody has focused so much on environmental issues, but also kind of the penny dropped when they see all the people within the institutions who were skeptical before, when they see all these innovations, all these eco-innovations that are really driving things forward, not bringing them back. I mean, really, whether it's using what was previously waste and now turning them into a valuable product, or doing eco-innovation in buildings to make them more energy efficient. I mean, it's been so clear that it's actually an economic boost rather than a break on the development. So therefore, there's been this change. And now, I mean, since the current Commission came into office in 2019, I mean, not only are environmental issues at the center, I mean, this was the first big package, the European Green Deal, that was presented when they came into office in 2019. But it's also integrated into all the different policy areas that you really, I mean, the structural funds are very much focused on funding green projects.
The structural funds are for the regions, more or less.
For the regions, but also for the social
infrastructure initiatives,
Yeah, but anyway, it's really integrated in the whole. I mean, on the one hand, you have a lot of policy, legislation, and kind of strategic documents like an action plan for circular economy, strategy for biodiversity, strategy for climate adaptation, and now we have an action plan for zero pollution. This summer there will also be the big package, the Fit for 55. I mean, it's not an exercise program for people of my age group, but it's more the big package that will prepare the European Commission or the Europe for how to actually get to the target of reducing emissions by 55% to 2030. So you have things like energy efficiency in buildings, renewable energy, effort sharing, the European emissions trading system, etc. So kind of the strategic documents. But on the other hand, you also have funding, because these changes are so fundamental. It's really a transformation of society, and it will be very, very expensive. So therefore, you have a lot of funding sources. I'll just mention a few of them. When you talk about innovation, on a European level, you must, of course, mention the Horizon program. And the Horizon program has a specific focus on green issues. I think it's definitely more than a third that goes specifically to climate-related things. I think there was a call that was closed this year on the European Green Deal with more than €1 billion in all kind of different areas of energy, of biodiversity, and all the kind of different green areas, funding these projects, which are not only, I mean, if it works well, it's not only giving money, but also leveraging money from other sources, like private sources and national public funds, but also setting up important networks in key kind of strategic sectors, like how do we make the batteries of tomorrow? How do we make clean hydrogen? How do we make clean steel with carbon-free steel, which is now close to reality, for instance. So the Horizon program really is a great driver of innovation.
So that's where most SMEs and startups should look?
Well, I mean, to be fair, I have to be honest. I'm not, I'm all for transparency. So it is kind of, it's not straightforward to apply for these funds, because it's taxpayers' money. So we need to make sure that we get best value for money. But they should link up with other actors. So if an individual SME would probably have problems getting money from the Horizon program, but they could link up with others and make a network maybe. But
for example, we're in one with sustainable tourism.
Yeah.
Sounds like a contradiction in terms, but running an accelerator program for startups in sustainable tourism. And clearly, there needs to be some organizations, but because the individual hotels, transportation companies, etc., wouldn't be able to.
No, but I mean, there are several other programs, and another one is the European version of the Innovation Fund, which is a kind of climate program that really focuses specifically on, for instance, the energy-intensive industries. How do you find low-carbon solutions for them, low-carbon processes for energy-intensive industries? How do you get further with the things that we've heard so much about, with the carbon capture and storage, or even better, carbon capture and utilization? How do we store energy? Because even if you have a windy day, and how do we make sure that renewable energy is stored in an efficient way? So these are the kind of things that the Innovation Fund does. And the last funding source on European level I just would like to mention is the LIFE program, a kind of the green program that's been there for almost 30 years. And I think that is actually a very good source for SMEs, because it is kind of it's not how to say, target innovation, really the research at a very, very high level, but it's like the applied version. If you have a solution, if you have something that works in a kind of at a lab level, then the LIFE program can fund the demonstration. How would that actually work in real life with real customers? So it's in between the innovation itself and the full market scale-up. There, the LIFE program is really good, and it's helped more than 4,000 projects over the years. So I think that's something and they have also actually simplified the application procedure. So now, to start with, the first application is just a few pages describing your idea, and then only the ones where the idea is good have to fill the full application. So, you know, you don't have to go through writing hundreds of pages and competing with so many. So these are just some of the programs. Of course, there are others, but I just, with this short time, I just focus on those that were most relevant.
Thank you, Stefan. Lise, as the raisin at the end of the sausage, a peculiar Danish expression, you are in charge of sustainable packaging, product and innovation at Arla Foods. I said it was a Danish company, but in reality you have farmers in 5 or 6 different countries here in Northern Europe. What?
7.
7. We used to have we did a fun thing with Arla a couple of years ago with the future of food that I mentioned, and to the Portuguese ambassador. Yeah, tell us, where does Arla come from? But Arla is big, and you do a lot of stuff. You are focusing on packaging. Where are we heading there?
That's right. And maybe there's a comma missing, because I belong to the department called Product and Innovation in Arla, and I'm responsible for sustainable packaging. So that is right into the heart of this topic. How do you drive sustainability through innovation and make it profitable? So that is actually what I do, with a specific focus on packaging. But before getting there, just for those of you who may not know, Arla is the 5th, we're discussing which is largest dairy company in the world. And we are owned by farmers in those 7 markets. It's around, it changes all the time, but 9,400-ish. And what is really important about those farmers is that they play a huge part in our sustainability agenda, obviously because they're the ones owning the cows, where we have a lot of focus on CO2 reduction, also thanks to this herd that we have in Arla. But we're selling products all over the world, so we also need to know what are the conditions for selling products. And I'll come back to that when we talk packaging, because it just makes it really complex. It's already difficult to meet conditions in Denmark, but when you're then adding the entire world to your agenda, it becomes very, very complicated. But in Arla, we have been driving a sustainable agenda for many, many years. But what is new is that we, over the last few years, have put much more structure to it. And I think if people are asking, how do you drive this topic? It's very much around how do you structure it and break it down into bits and pieces. And I think if you go to arla.com, you will actually see that sustainability at Arla is about stronger planet, stronger people. And under each of these, you find a lot of different segments. So if we take stronger people, we had a lot around it today also. It's around the health of people. It's also about human rights, etc. It's about responsible sourcing of all our ingredients, etc., etc. The stronger planet is then very much around the environmental factors. So looking at the entire value chain, starting at farm level, what can we do there? That is actually more than 80% of our CO2 emissions. Moving into the logistics, we have lots of trucks bringing the milk to our more than 60 factories. And then, of course, we process our milk. Then we need to bring it out to many, many, many supermarkets. Again, a big logistic fleet. Then we have the whole area around the consumers, which is food waste. How do we make sure we don't waste in our factories, but how do we also support our users not to waste? And our users, our first step is the customers, the retailers, the supermarket chains. How can we support them in reducing food waste? And how can we also make it easier for our consumers not to waste food? And then, of course, we have the whole packaging agenda. Our target is to become carbon net zero by 2050. And then again, we break it down into some steps. And the very big step we have ahead of us is 30% CO2 reduction by 2030. Now, I'm responsible for the packaging agenda, and actually packaging is just 2-3% on our CO2 emissions. So that is not the big topic. But what really worries our consumers, our retailers, is waste, the whole waste agenda. So that becomes really critical here. So how do we make sure that our products or packaging solutions for more than tens of thousands of products that are going to the entire world are converted into becoming, we call it circular. So the packaging is circular. And when we say circular, of course, we have the whole plastic agenda. How do we make sure that our plastic solutions are recyclable, that we are using recycled content? We call it phasing out virgin fossil plastic. That is one of our targets towards 2030. But it is actually also the biological circle. We have a lot of our products actually packed in fiber-based solutions with very limited plastic. And how can we gear that up even more? I think less than 1/3 of all our packaging material is actually plastic. Our dilemma is, of course, that we have very wet, moist products. Most of the dairy products have a water content of some kind. So we are really looking for solutions that can help us to get into paper packaging with very limited membranes and barriers so that we can start phasing out more and more plastic. But plastic, for us, is not an evil, but a lot of our customers are asking us, you need to change, you need to drive this down.
Is it going back to basic, the old Tetra Pak, and not the one with the plastic lid? Or is that too basic?
We are talking innovation, right?
Yes.
Because we introduced that cap years ago because it actually had a great functionality. It allowed people to store their milk in different ways, and some people find it more hygienic. Now, some of you would have observed that we have taken off the caps of our organic range in Denmark. We get a lot of different feedback. Some people are happy, some are not. But how can you actually innovate to create that feature, that pouring functionality without having a lot of plastic? So that is one of our big targets. How do we get a reclosed system?
So it's a lot about materials innovation in that.
Lots, yeah. And finding that the borderline between, how do you put moist products into a lot of fiber base. And when we talk about fiber, it is of course also a lot around making sure we have good control of land use and where we are sourcing it from. But we do see also on our CO2 impact that fiber is a very good but difficult way forward.
I know it's not your field, but we also had René mention it, that most of the impact from your sector comes from the farmers, and I imagine from the cows themselves. It's not your specific area, but what strides are made in that field? Do you know what are we moving to goats instead, or what? I don't know what. Maybe you know.
Maybe I can quickly answer from an Arla perspective. Yeah. We have to feed a growing population in the world.
Exactly.
Dairy continues to have a hugely important place in our daily diet globally. So of course we need to find out how do we deal with the methane from the cows. And we have a great example in Sweden where we are piloting how do you drive trucks on biogas coming from the manure. At the same time, we have a collaboration with universities, especially Aarhus University, Professor Peter Lund, on how do we create those new solutions that help us reduce methane over the years. We convert that into CO2 impact. There are some factors you multiply with. And we already know that the Arla milk is having less than half of the footprint, CO2 footprint, of what is the average globally. So our role is also to be role models so that we start seeing dairy industry in total bringing down the CO2 or the methane footprints, because we do need to feed a growing population. Our consumers, they love great taste, and there's still lots of people out there who enjoy a good piece of dairy product.
René, you reacted like you said you had the answer to that.
Yes, because it's actually a mixture of new technology and new understandings, because it actually understands what's going on in the rumen, what is actually the bacteria in the rumen who make the methane, and that's actually not the bacteria helping to produce the milk. So it is using new technology, using new additives, organic additives. It could be algae that some have shown have a huge reduction of methane. So it's a combination of using technologies and understanding the cow, so to say, because it's not transferred to vegan products, because then we have other problems.
You're changing the flora of the intestines of the cows, and then
then you have possibilities to reduce it. So it's actually bringing up new scientific ideas and try to multiply it and make it commercial available products. So that's actually one of the solutions is not to move out the cow. It also to get more vegan diet, of course, but it's actually more working with technologies and new research knowledge and combine that and then move it into products. And that's where collaboration is the key. Collaboration between researchers, small startups, small, medium-sized companies who have great ideas, and companies like Arla that can move it into the world market. So that's how we see the solution to a lot of these problems.
So as a consumer, are you fooling yourself if you think that you're more sustainable if you have a glass of soy drink instead of a glass of milk?
I think we could have a long feeling-based discussion regarding that.
Not evidence-based discussion?
Well, you can go into a lot of discussion whether you then should look at the content of methane or how much water is used to produce 1 liter of almond milk, and that's...
There's no such thing as almond milk.
Exactly.
I spoke to Lise last week, and the only thing that can be called milk comes from a cow.
That's right. But I think it's a clear figure that there's not just one great solution for it, because creating one solution might bring some other problems to the table.
It's true. Maria, let's go back to those that are in the core of environmental change. What are you, and that's for all of you, what are some of the great innovations, the promising innovations that you see coming towards us? What should we hope for?
Before answering that, I would like to invite Lise, if you have a challenge on packaging, I mean, we would like to try to help you and see, scout for you, screen for you, see what type of companies are out there. I mean, we have a network across the world, so I would very much like you to invite you to let us help you solve your challenges.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, to answer your question, I think there will be a lot going on this whole power to X carbon capture. I mean, we need to solve this. We need to decarbonize heavy industry, decarbonize the transportation sector. So I think a lot will be going on in that field the next 5 years. I think the whole discussion on plastics, I mean, in Denmark, we have very ambitious targets that we should not burn the plastics anymore. We need to get it into a loop. And the plastics that cannot get into the loop, we need to figure out I think it will be chemical recycling. At this moment, this is not possible, but I think, I mean...
What about that big, beautiful waste incinerator we have out on Amager? What are we going to do?
We need to use it wisely, at least.
Christmas trees, or...?
I mean, I think there will still be, but, I mean, the targets are that we need to burn less. But then, of course, where do we get the heating from? So there are a lot of challenges, but I think that will be worked on. And the third thing I would emphasize is the whole protein discussion. I mean, how do we use our land, and how do we, exactly as you say, feed growing populations? I mean, should we go in other directions? I mean, a lot of people are looking into insects. Should we do more on grass? Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in that field as well. How can we use our very scarce soil in a better way? Yeah.
I think there are some countries that have, India, for example, where meat consumption is relatively low, and they don't seem to be suffering, at least not from that, so much. Stefan, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to?
Well, I mean, there's so many things you could say. I mean, there's so many things going on with renewable energies, new generation of solar panels, etc., batteries. But I still would also come back to what Maria said, because the focus is so much on carbon reduction, and Power to X is getting so much funding as well now, with the attention to it, that things will probably happen. Maybe 5 years, I'm not sure, but 10 years, something will happen there. And then the need is really there also for the carbon capture and storage, because for the in energy-intensive industry, some of them, there are very few other solutions. I mean, I think in a UN report a few years ago, I read that 50% of the urban construction that will be there in 2050 has not yet been constructed. So bearing in mind the amount of cement that will be used, and knowing that cement the production of cement is extremely it has a lot of emissions, both from the very high temperature you need to produce it, but also from the actual chemical process. You can do something about the 1500 degrees. You can find some ways of getting a sustainable heating, but for the chemical process, it's very difficult. And therefore, in order to actually do something about it, you need to advance on CCS. I think that is the key word. And the other innovation I would like is really looking at innovative policies instead, because I think that we are now talking about what businesses should do, etc. But in terms of the public sector, in terms of legislators, they should set the framework. And there needs to be this, in Denmark, there's been this discussion about should there be a carbon tax, a unified carbon tax. And this, if you set a long-term kind of price, if you internalize the external cost, all the costs that these environmental pollutions have, and so companies have a playing field, they know what to do, they will, the business of business is business. They need to kind of advance towards their own objectives. Probably many of them, it is about profit, but they live in a society, so they will react to what society does. And if the legislators say, in 10 years' time, there will be a carbon price at this level, they will make the right investment, they will find the innovative solutions. And I think that, for me, that is the key innovation that needs to set the framework in the right way for businesses to do innovation.
You made me think of this, the externality of alcohol in Denmark. It's something like a revenue loss of 8 billion, I believe, in a year. Would that also, so could you also put a carbon, not a carbon tax, but there are lots of externalities in life and in society.
No, but the problem with, the problem with the environmental externalities, you have some of them. It's about the health cost of air pollution, the people who die because there are so many particles in our cars, etc. Fine, that can be dealt with maybe. But the main externality is the cost for the next generations. So it's really bringing the bill to somebody else, and that is something. If you really can internalize that cost, it will completely change the game.
René, what are your the promising innovations that you've seen? We heard one of them.
Well, I think I have to say the same as Maria, because she actually touched down on our 4 innovations, which is the big game changers that we see. That's carbon capture, it's power to X, it's climate-friendly agriculture and circular economy. So that's actually the 4 areas where we are putting a lot of money into to research and innovation in the coming years. And on top of that, I also have to mention data. I have to mention that we have to be better and we have to be clever using data, because a lot of the knowledge is there, but we have to combine it correctly, we have to measure it correctly, and we have to understand it. So data
So we know what works, actually.
Yeah, actually, so better to measure and better to understand. We have a lot of data. It's more scary, the thing that we don't understand yet. So data is also some overarching elements that we have to include.
I know that was some of your concerns also, Camilla, the impact measurement and data when you have the SDG accelerator. Can you elaborate a bit on that? But also, what are your hopeful innovations?
Well, I agree very much what has been said, and it's a combination of all factors combined together, legislation, finance, technology, etc. And I think the real innovation is the partnership around it as well, where we work together and lower the barriers, each of us, to be able to receive and be open for ideas and innovate together. But now that you mentioned impact measurement and management, we see a lot of companies today, advertising or promoting themselves that they are sustainable or they are SDG compliant, etc. And we know there's a lot of hot air out there. So we also have to tighten the screws on for investors, for governments, etc., to actually recognize when SDG impact has been achieved, or green impact, or whatever. So we have to develop these tools that are manageable as well, because we know some of them are so comprehensive that it's very difficult for some companies or other organizations to join. I mean, the European taxonomy, I know, is extremely complex because my husband works on it, and even he admits that he's not to the bottom of it. So, you know, we have to create for different types of organization a measurement tool that is actually manageable, but where they can say with some certainty that there is impact in the right direction. And here we have developed an SDG impact initiative to be used by the big investing companies to at least create something like the taxonomy, but a little bit simplified, but globally, because the taxonomy is primarily for the EU. We are trying to set a standard framework that everybody in the world can say as a minimum, and that we can certify is definitely SDG proof, if you want. And it's aimed at investors that they use this to create a level playing field. So there is fair competition, and you know, those who do it right are not outcompeted by those who are smart in public relations and communications. So this is really important, that there is some focus on this as well, that whoever is putting their money somewhere has instruments and verifications that their investments are going to the right cause. But I mean, I think we are, you know, as Stefan also mentioned, we already come a long way. Today we're not discussing if anymore. I mean, when I started this journey, it was still an if. You know, we're still in a process. I'm sure most of you in here, you know, were in the business of convincing. We're not there anymore. Now it's the how, and how can we do this so that everybody can get on board.
Working within working as director at the UNDP, are any of the SDGs overlooked? Are there any that we don't really pay much attention to? Good governance, or?
Yeah. I mean, it's not that they're overlooked. Some of them are just more difficult to approach because we simply don't have the mechanisms to address them yet as well as we have. For instance, within the green and environment area, climate and environment has been a huge focus, but also because it's very urgent. And even we admit that has to be addressed no matter what. But on the social front is perhaps where things are lagging behind, but we are trying to catch up and now, you know, develop instruments to address the social aspects, decent work, human rights. Lise mentioned that you had in your, categories to consider as well. And as you said, it's also human rights. That has been there for a long time, I think. Global Compact and their 10 principles, you know, which were created a long time ago, has sensitized most companies today to that. Whether they're respecting it or not is maybe another matter. But you know, also this practice and ability to see the holistic picture whenever you embark on a journey of launching a product or entering a market, etc., is this ability to connect the dots. And back to partnerships. You know, you have to open yourself to involve a lot of partners from sectors that you don't know anything about or authorities that, you know, you need help from. So I think this is the SDG 17 is a very important and sometimes overlooked tool as something that is very necessary.
We might look into a future accelerator on good governance and policy, also how we can make that better. I know several investors in startups related to SDGs are looking for that.
Absolutely.
The more predictable something is going, the better, and the more transparency in governance, the better.
Absolutely. We see from investors, now that you mention it, that one of the primary concerns they are bringing forward when we're looking a lot at how can we provide more financing towards these efforts. And most of them say, well, you know, it's a great project, it's a great idea, but what about the governance? How can we be sure that legislation will be in our favor, will ensure our, you know, owners' rights, mitigating risks, etc. So this is where UNDP has a lot of work in supporting governments to exactly create that framework, legislative framework, and the conditions for businesses to thrive for that purpose.
It's not all countries that either do not have a constitution or that have the Fifth Republic and the Sixth Republic and whatever. Usually that's quite rigid when something has to change. We have to wrap up again with Lise, and I have received a message that you should turn the microphone a bit towards you. You can turn it. There we go.
Okay.
You get the last word, Lise.
Okay.
What are some of the great innovations that you are hoping to see the next 5 years or so? It doesn't have to be related to Arla, but may very well be.
Well, I will relate it to Arla because we have talked about milk. But remember, our farmers produce milk, they produce lots of crops. And therefore, we are really embarking on this best of both journey where you will see the components mixed. And we've actually done that for years. Now we'll just do that even more because it's all about great taste and nutrition. And that can come from many, many components. And then, of course, for me, the next 5 years, how do we wrap it responsibly?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to the panel for being part of this discussion on how we can innovate ourselves to a more sustainable future. Tak.